MC is in the house. All right, let me sort this out. What is going on, folks? It's a good day when I get to do a live show and talk about cool stuff, which, of course, I'm a little biased, I think, is every live show that I do. I'm going to give you guys a moment to get on, and while you guys do that, for those of you that are watching this video later, let me remind you, and all these things I'm going to refer to are in the description wherever you're watching, whether it's YouTube or Facebook. You can go to masterchim.com and join my email list. And every day you'll get a free email. I usually pick a topic to do a little bit of a deep dive on. Every single day I put a quote of the day there, and usually I'll let you guys know what I'm up to, whether it's some event, products, things of that sort. So you can go to masterchim.com, put your email in, and all the other stuff is in the description. You can check that out. So today, what I'm going to talk about, and you know what, I have to be a little bit more disciplined with my protocols on these live streams. And one of those things means that if you can see and hear me, do me a favor, just put a comment, because I have 3 locations that I am streaming from. One of them is the TRIBALNOMICS YouTube, and the other 2 are on Facebook, both my personal page, which I'm going to check right now. I should probably do this on the desktop, but I don't want to chance taking up too much of the bandwidth. For some reason, I think the bandwidth. All right, so I am on the TRIBALNOMICS page on YouTube. Now, as far as Facebook is concerned, all right, I am on the Justin Garcia page. All right, Rockstar, what's up? So he is on the, all right, he's on the Justin Garcia page. All right, so Big Joe, thank you, my friend. Thank you for that. All right, so we're good to go. So a couple of different topics today, and I had them prepared. I sent out an email. Now, in the morning of my live streams, I usually will send out an email with the relevant links so people have an easy time finding it, so they're reminded that it's Wednesday, and every Wednesday at noon, I'm here for a live show. Thank you, Jesse. And I wrote down for today the one topic that we didn't get to last week, plus 2 more that, I thought would be relevant. Now, I am going to sort of, what's up, Big Will? I'm going to just shelve those topics for a moment. I will get to them, famous last words. But I wanted to break something down before I did that. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, I believe his name is Mike Glover, right? Now, Mike Glover, and I'm going to go back to this video. Mike Glover is, I believe, the founder of Fieldcraft Survival, right? And on YouTube, he is the Fieldcraft Survival channel. And he did a breakdown where he talked about the cowardice of the police officers in Uvalde. And I don't know if you guys have either watched his video, and you can go to, let me see if I could, I'm going to show it, right? So he did this 6 days ago, and I hadn't had a chance to look at it. And I don't know if you guys can see that, right? Cowardice and lack of training are not the same. The Fieldcraft Survival channel. And I watched it, and he did an incredible job. I am not going to even remotely attempt to try and break down the events of Uvalde. I don't think that is probably my best use in a situation like this. I think there are more qualified, trusted, vetted people. I have many, many close friends of mine that I have had conversations regarding what happened in Uvalde, breaking down, tactically what went wrong, and many other things that were deficient, either deficient or went sideways once the shooter went in and started shooting. So, but one of the things that I wanted to do to add some value to the topic is something that I consider myself to be a little bit more overlapped with, a little bit more interested, maybe even vetted in terms of having some expertise in. And that is the tribal dynamics and how that's affected and how that played itself out in Uvalde. Now, I don't know if it's Uvalde, but whatever. You guys know what I'm saying. So I wanted to talk specifically about cowardice, right? So one of the premises that Mike Glover had on the Fieldcraft video that he did, and again, the name of it is Cowardice and Lack of Training Are Not the Same. One of the recurring themes was cowardice. And now the distinction that he made, which I think was a very good one in the lack of training and cowardice, is something that, I give him credit for making. And you guys should watch that video to understand where he deep dives where that's concerned. I do have some real world experience and insight concerning these things, but I didn't want to offer a parallel to his position, but rather just take the idea of cowardice and sort of, excise it from that topic in general or that topic specifically and talk about it more in generally. So why do we have, I would say, an explosion of cowardice in today's society, right? And let's talk about that. Now, cowardice, first and foremost, is a tribal term. Okay, cowardice is a tribal term. When we say somebody is being a coward, the way that we use that term, we are describing somebody who is too scared, too fearful to do their job, right? So if a man has a job to do and he is too scared to do it, we call him a coward. Now, we have to understand that concurrent to him being a coward in that tribal context, he is also not being a coward in another context. And that other context to be considered is self-preservation, right? So we have to understand that when somebody is a coward, they are choosing to pursue the mission of self-preservation over the mission of whatever their job happened to be. And that job and what it happened to be obviously falls outside or beyond the context of the individual, right? Now, when we make the observation that he's being a coward, we have that connotation, right? That implication that he was beholden to some other identity in either obligation via his role, his oath, combination of the two. And the distinction between those two is like if you're a father of a son, you have a role that you may not have given an oath, or put your word, in terms of, contracting yourself through an oath to do these things. You could fall into these things organically, like fatherhood, and you're basically expected by the tribe to take care of your kids. So that's the distinction between a role versus an oath, right? So a coward is somebody who chooses self-preservation, right? So now I would say, how do we break down what happened in Uvalde concerning cowardice? And there I would say, we get into, what's up, Big John? What's up, Corey? In Uvalde, we get into the distinction that needs to be made that Mike Glover makes. Whereas there is a lack of training, and the lack of training creates a lack of confidence. And he makes a distinction between the two of them that they shouldn't just sort of be glossed over. Now, I would actually say that a lack of training is cowardice due to uncertainty, is cowardice due to the fragility of alliance. And that's not to be confused with cowardice in terms of somebody's individual makeup, where they are going to opt for self-preservation over any alliance they choose, right? So if, and I'm going to think of an example off the top of my head. If somebody were to say, hey, I'm running into the store real quick. Do me a favor and watch my cart. I don't fucking know. There's a cart with stuff in it, not a kid or anything, but just a cart with stuff. Do me a favor, go run in the store, watch this cart. And as you know, you're like, all right, no problem. I'm here anyway. You know, go ahead, run right in. And you see a bunch of, you know, I don't know, derelicts walking down the block, and they threaten you and say that they want to take what's in the cart. That is an example of a situation whereby you might say, well, listen, you know, I agreed to watch this cart, but the alliance is so insignificant compared to self-preservation in this context that I might be willing to be like, hey, you know, that's not even my cart. Do what you got to do, because I might not be willing to risk my life, you know, to continue to do that. And when the person comes out, I could say, hey, I was watching your cart, but some dudes came over here, they had weapons and stuff, and they took it, you know, like, and you know, maybe the person's like, hey, not your problem. And that's sort of something as a society we need to work out on an individual basis, you know, because if somebody says, hey, could you watch this? You know, if I were to say, well, I'll watch it right up until watching it starts to risk, you know, my commitment to self-preservation, at that point, I can no longer watch your cart. Like, nobody's going to say that in practical application, right? So there is this sort of unwritten expectation of the strength of an obligation, you know, in casual day-to-day life, the cart being an example of that. Well, there are going to be individuals who, because of a lack of training, do not see themselves as being overlapped significantly with the task at hand, with the job, with the actual identity of being, in Uvalde's case, a police officer. If you are put in a position, just a friend of mine a few days ago, a very, very, you know, respected warrior friend of mine with a very, very impressive military background, I heard him breaking down the mindset in certain jobs, and he made the distinction where it's like, if you are not ready to lose your life doing this, this is not the job for you. And he happened to be talking to a law enforcement organization or team, so that was the context of him making that statement. And there is something to be said for, well, is this job that I'm obligating myself to do, does this include my life? Now, where, you know, I might deviate from Mike Glover, and I would want to sit down and discuss this with him to you know, if I were to actually wanted to flesh out the nuance of where he and I may go in different directions. I would say that as soon as somebody commits to being a police officer, they should have an understanding that their life is something that they may, you know, have to sacrifice at some point in the nature of this job. Now, we could say that, well, you know, a kid could say he wants to be a fireman. It doesn't mean that we hold him accountable for it, because we realize that he's not even qualified to make that commitment. And similarly, a very easy response to me saying that would be, well, these guys don't even know what that entails. You know, like, you know, yeah, if you gotta, you know, give your life up to be a cop, yeah, that's part of it, but that's probably not going to happen. That's sort of like a mindset that a lot of new police officers, especially nowadays, come into the job with. And I observed that, you know, not only as a martial arts instructor who has the opportunity to be in front of a lot of law enforcement, but, you know, having over the years worked with them in various degrees and capacities. So you have a group of people now who are in this job, who are maybe not being trained enough, and not being trained enough will create a level of intensity, and I'll use that word, a level of intensity in the job whereby they go, nope, self-preservation. And their training, the more training they have, their confidence level will see it through to a higher level of intensity, whereby maybe if they were ever to opt for self-preservation over sacrifice, you know, maybe in the functional carrying out of their job, we might not ever see it, right? If somebody's willing to die for, you know, as a police officer, I mean, and I don't mean to be trivial here in police officers' commitment, but from a robotic, like just probability statistics logic point of view, it's like the only people who we knew were ready to die were people who were exposed and sort of were affected by a level of violent force that either ended their lives or could have ended their lives, right? But the people who are committed to it but haven't yet been in that situation, we understand. We want them to say, certainly culturally, it makes sense. We want them to say, "Yeah, I'm ready to give my life." I'm like that. Reinforcement will incentivize a greater overlap should that situation arise. But we understand there are two factors really to sort of create or to sabotage or to break down cowardice in the ranks of your tribe, and one of them is sure training. You will reduce cowardice through training because the level of confidence will increase. So there is a bigger gap, or I should say, a bigger chunk of what somebody does in the job in terms of intensity, increasing intensity. More of that level of intensity, they will have confidence and certainty, and therefore they will be able to act and not be cowardly. But then the other factor to mitigate, cowardice in your ranks is to basically have, and this is I would say the bulk of my argument here, there needs to be consequence, right? So the greater societal issue we have right now is that we've removed natural consequence from things that historically were prevalent in tribal organizations. Cowards should be killed. That's a natural statement. It's like that is something that throughout history, if cowards weren't killed, then there wouldn't be an incentivization to do the functional task at hand, especially in the warrior role, tribally. So a warrior needs to be able to commit and sacrifice everything up to and including their lives for their job. Why? Because the warrior role it's not replaceable a warrior role. So if I'm going to have a warrior role in a society or in a tribe, let's say, there needs to be consequence for those warriors who choose instead to be cowardly. Now, what does that do? It tells people that the negotiation on an individual basis to weigh whether or not they should expose themselves to violence, whether or not they should expose themselves to the type of harm that could end their life. That negotiation is almost a waste of time. Why? Because the consequence of them being a coward would be far greater than any computation they would do or calculation they would do in the moment. And socially or historically, what have societies done with cowards or people who have acted cowardly? What were the consequences? Well, number one, the easy one is you get killed. How many times have you heard anecdotally through certain stories where certain military leaders had to basically say, if you run the other way, I'm going to shoot you. So you got to fight. Aside from that, you look at the concept of honor and actual social status, the type of classification, class in society that you and your family are a part of based on the honor, of the family name or the family organization, you can say, in a greater sense. Like cowardice would be something that would affect everybody in your family. Well, without this consequence, what you really do is you leave it up to the individual as to whether or not they want to sacrifice their lives in the execution of their duties. So without consequence, you're basically leaving it up to the individual. Now you could say, well, in America, this is America, and individuals have rights, and if somebody opts to be a coward, there shouldn't be a consequence for that. And like, okay, if you want to say that, and I don't know, maybe that's an argument or a debate we could have another day. To be honest, I have never fleshed out my position fully where that's concerned. But I will say, if we were ever going to rely on an individual making the right choice in a situation like that, this point in society, this point in American history is the absolute worst time to make that or to rely on that type of decision to be made by the individuals. Never in the history of America has there been more people so risk averse because the aversion really doesn't have much of a cost. So you think of all the cops who, and this hasn't played itself entirely through, but you think of all the cops who demonstrated a level of cowardice in the situation of Uvalde. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be shamed? Well, sure, we're going to try and shame them. Mike Glover shamed them in that video. As he should shame now. They're cowardly little fucking cunts. And I curse a lot. I know Mike Glover tries not to, and I heard a couple of bleeps and stuff, but that's not somebody, that's not something that I'm, concerned with. But I have to make sure that if we're going to shame them, there's no leverage in trying to shame somebody who doesn't have honor. So if you're somebody who doesn't have honor, shaming you really isn't going to make a big deal. It's an honor again, even honor, right? Let's use this. I'm going to create an example here to talk about, to add a little context or understanding of what I mean when I say honor, because a lot of people use the word, they really have no understanding of what it is. Sometimes, well, it means a good reputation, and there's some overlap with it. But let's say that I go to a effeminate homosexual man. Hey, you're prancing around like a little girl. He would look at me and go, so? And I'd go, well, all right. I guess that's that. Because if and not that I go around doing this, but this is an example. If I were going to try and shame somebody into not acting a certain way, this effeminate man telling him, he's prancing around like a little girl. If he isn't affected by that, that means the system of honor whereby a man being likened to a woman is frowned upon, that system has its own currency, right? And honor is that currency in that system. So he is acting dishonorably for a tribe or a set of values to which he's not even a member. So he doesn't give a shit how he's acting, where that's concerned. If you look at the more, dare I say, traditional Muslim followers, and they have either hijabs or the ninja outfits, they may have an opinion, not that we would ever hear it, on what American women, their humility or their virtue based on how American women dress, out there gallivanting their faces and hair and stuff, the little putanas. And they might say, well, you're acting like a whore. And an American woman, might go, well, why? Because my hair, like, fuck you. Doesn't mean anything. So it's hard to shame people if they don't have the same honor as you do, or you're trying to use a currency that somebody doesn't recognize as being valuable, right? So to shame these people now, well, what does that mean? There's no functional value to shaming somebody who doesn't share your honor. Now, you're going to have a lot of people, right? This is I would say at this point, an overly feminized society we live in. It's a lot of nurturing, right? A lot of nurturing. You'll have a bunch of people that'll, they'll say things like, well, you don't know what it's like to be in that type of situation, how you would act. And it's like, yeah, okay, irrelevant, because this isn't something that is sort of, specialized knowledge. Well, he knows what it's like, so I can't have an opinion on it because I don't know what it's like. Well, here's the fucking thing. Regardless of what it's like, I know that if we have a society of fucking cowards, if our warriors are cowards, we're fucked. So whether or not I was ever in that situation, is irrelevant. It's a moot point. It distracts from the actual conversation at hand, which is, what is the consequence that this coward's supposed to face? So you'll have people say, well, you don't know what it's like. Or some people will say it's only a matter of training, a lack of training. And that, by the way, I don't think that was Mike Glover's position at all. But you'll have people who will say, well, they need to be trained more. They need to be trained more. Or this is cowards at the command. This is cowards at the commands. Well, one of the things that happened in the timeline of that event in Uvalde is, and I wasn't aware of this until I watched Mike Glover's video, that an officer, because I didn't deep dive on that thing, because it's like, yeah, I know this thing is going to play out again multiple times, because there's so many variables that we're just doing the wrong thing with, that this is just going to keep happening. So I wasn't really interested, in doing a deep dive, but I was intrigued that he had kudos to him. He had a great title card, right? The little poster, that thumbnail. That's the thing, thumbnail. He had a great thumbnail for his video. And I was like, all right, I'll bite. I had to do some driving. I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And I was glad I did. But I didn't realize that there was a police officer that had basically a shot at the bad guy prior to the bad guy walking into the school. But after he had already fired rounds, after he had already, he was wearing a tactical outfit, and he had just crashed his car. Like, shit was already going bad. This guy had already taken shots at people, was walking towards the school, the elementary school, and there was an officer who had a beat on him. And what he did was he called basically command and asked for permission to shoot this guy. Now, just understand all the things at play there. He's worried about his job. He's not worried about doing the right thing or the wrong thing in terms of a greater morality, in terms of a warrior ethos, in terms of the survival of our society. No, he's making sure his job's okay because he doesn't want to get in trouble. He's not trying to save kids. Whatever made him go and do that. Now, one could say, well, he's a disciplined officer. Maybe that's their protocol. Well, okay. I don't know if that's their protocol. But I do know a supposed good guy with a rifle, had a shot at a bad guy who had already demonstrated. There was no doubt that this guy was a bad guy, that he was erratic, that he was armed, and that he was about to walk into an elementary school. If that doesn't bring you to act, then that says a lot about you as an individual. So this officer was worried about his job, or worried about the acceptance of his tribe of officers and the culture that that they share. He was more concerned about preserving his reputation amongst that group than any greater obligation to anybody outside of that group. Right now, I'll be the first one to say that if you show me a video of a bunch of starving kids across the planet, I'll watch that video and go, man, that's fucked up. But I'm not going to take any money that I have from my tribe and send it over there. I'm not going to get off mission because I understand that's a foolish way to conduct oneself. It's hard to build up strength as an individual and then a tribe if people who are disconnected are constantly getting your resources, right? Immigration talk, we could have that. But this individual, this cop who didn't take that shot, is making that type of assessment when he's looking at an elementary school. In his jurisdiction, right, in where he is a cop, he's looking at them the same way that I look at those kids on the other side of the planet, where he's like, well, I'm not going to, because if I shoot this guy, now what if I get jammed up? I lose my job. Maybe my kids, I'm not around, I'm in jail. You know what they do to cops in jail. You're like, you could start that whole thing. And whatever that building of children meant to him, it did not trump whatever that internal dialogue was. And it allowed him to go and call. And obviously the people on the other end of the horn, and again, I'm speculating because I don't know what that exact conversation was, but he didn't take the shot because they didn't give him permission. I believe that's what Mike Glover said. So they're watching their ass just like anybody else. They're not on the scene. And, whether or not you agree with that, maybe they don't understand what the officer, it's almost like, well, why would he even be asking? Like, if he's asking to take the shot, maybe it's ambiguous enough that he doesn't just take it, because there should be a criteria by which the officer just takes it. So maybe the people at command are like, well, if he didn't just take the shot, then it might be ambiguous enough that, stand down, because it doesn't sound like exactly what the fuck's going on. It turns out we could say that, no, they were probably just being cowardly cunts also because of what transpired after. There was one guy who, went to engage the threat and basically didn't have anybody with him. And again, I don't want to just stick on this, the tactical aspect of it. Mike Glover does a great job of that. Other guys have done, better jobs than I'm willing to do, or maybe even can do on breaking down that tactical, unraveling. But I will say the cowardice is, we got to remember, if somebody is going to look out for themselves and self-preservation is something that they're dedicated to, then there needs to be something that trumps self-preservation, right? So when I define the term sacrifice is an investment of your actual life in an alliance in which you see yourself. If I do not see me as continuing to exist through this alliance, then at some point I would have to opt out of what I'm willing to invest in this alliance because of self-preservation. The way you get self-preservation, the way you go beyond that to the point where you have warriors who are willing to sacrifice their lives, is they are connected to something that is more important than their life. And that might be the reputation amongst their tribe. That might be the legacy that the tribe has or holds for them. The easy way to illustrate this is looking at a parent with his kids. It's like, yeah, I have 4 kids. I would die in a heartbeat for any one of them. Why? Because they're me. That's me, just like I'm my parents. Like my father passed away a few years ago, but like one of the things that I really felt, when he did, it's like, Pops, I got it. Like, you're good. You did your job. We're good. Me and my brother, my sister, we're good. Everybody's taking care of each other. Everybody's working hard. You're good. You did your job. And there's a certain point where we look at our children as being more important than even our own lives. And I would say at the heart of that is the fact that they're us, and we see our existence, our identity being continued in them, right? So it's a form of immortality, we could say, with an identity. When they look at the tribe members like that, it's like, we're not dying. There's that scene in one of those Batman movies when Bane, the one with Bane, and the Tom Hardy Bane, not the other one, and they take over the plane in the beginning, and they needed to find a body because they wanted to say that was Bane when they separated the plane. And Bane's guy was about to escape, and he was like, no, they need to follow, they need to find a body in the wreckage. And the guy said something like, oh, so it's begun, and he said it has, or whatever he said. But the guy was like, all right, we're doing this thing. We're going to do what we plan to do. And Bane was like, yeah. That individual's life meant nothing to him because he existed through this connection, and that trumped his instinct, his animal instinct for self-preservation, right? So when we look at cowardice, that's what you get. You get people who opt at some point for self-preservation, and where they opt out of their job for self-preservation is, number one, fear-based, and it is also dysfunctional. Right? It is dysfunctional because they're opting out, basically, we could say early, right? Job's not done yet. They're opting out early. So how do we do it? I mentioned it before. Let me connect it to where we're at now. What's up, FL Treasure? What's up, my man, Jay Crussell? How do we battle cowardice? It is consequence. How do we continue to invest in the disincentivization of cowardice? Overlap. We train people to see themselves in the culture in which we expect them to sacrifice for. We explain this through training. We explain this through alliance. You ask not any, but the overwhelming number of combat veterans, who were you fighting for? And in my experience, the overwhelming majority of them say, my brothers, for the guys here, the guys there. If you guys have ever seen that show, Band of Brothers, that miniseries, one of the characters in it, who I had the opportunity to meet before he passed, Wild Bill Guinere, he had gotten charged, like, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 times, with going AWOL, because he would be injured, he would be in a hospital, and when he was ready to go back to combat, he wouldn't join whatever group happened to be moving through at the moment. He would basically escape the hospital and find his guys. And every time he did that, he was listed as being AWOL, right? And there was a problem with that. He actually got in trouble, I think, after the war because of that, right? But he's somebody who, you ask him, what were you fighting for? He was fighting for his brothers. So why do you see cowardice amongst these ranks of officers? Because they're not brothers. There is no understanding that their sacrifice will be treated so significantly that the glory that awaits a warrior upon their ultimate sacrifice is one worth the sacrifice to the warrior. Now, another term I heard, a good buddy of mine, Bill Rapier, shout out to Bill Rapier. You guys can check him out at amtacshooting.com, American Tactical, amtacshooting.com. I heard him describe glory seekers, guys that are basically looking for that glory, looking for that, that big reaction or that social currency, based on their actions, and how they could be a liability because they're people who are not willing to stay within the confines of their role. If they're performing a job that is relying upon the orchestrated or harmonious actions of many individuals, it's not a good thing to have one individual want the spotlight to shine a little bit brighter on him when he's in a team environment. And we know that in other applications, right? We could say the basketball guy who never passes the ball, we could call him the glory seeker, right? And the thing is, glory seekers, I would only imagine, I'm sure people who use that term in their jobs more commonly, they would have more to add. But I could only imagine how a glory seeker is not a good thing, because although they show maybe what one could call bravery or courage, they also undermine the integrity of what the actual tactics that they trained are and how they're played out. So they're basically fucking up what we're doing because they want attention, right? So that's not a good thing either. But when we have, Treasure says, tribal preservation over concerns about immediate personal safety. Absolutely. And here's the thing, one of the talks I gave, I just had PressureCon this past weekend. And one of the talks I gave was the cost of offset. And a point that I made there is that when somebody's a part of a tribe, he thinks to grow the tribe. When somebody thinks as an individual, they think to grow the individual. That's not to say an individual can't have an identity. It's not that he can't understand where he sort of ends and the tribe begins, or where the offset between him and his tribe are. But when he considers the tribe as being an integral part of who he is, he looks to grow the tribe, because in his mind it is also growing him. So that's the universal aspect of how that plays itself out. Yarn Saxa, what's up? She says it works in personal relationships as well. And you're absolutely right. And this is why I think it is so important to buy my book. No, this is why it is so important to understand concepts like overlap and offset, right? Overlap and offset. I do describe that in my book. Let me tell you the page. It is page 31. Page 31 in the book. Overlap and offset, called the tribal wall. Me as we, right? So this idea is where we see it in these cops, these coward cops, is there's a part of the job, right? So if the job we say is, the job, there is a part of that job that is offset from the alliance as they see it, right? So if I'm here and I want to illustrate this, stand by. So I have a whole camera to do this thing, but I'm just going to fucking do it here. If we have the individual, right? So this is the cop. And then we have the job. There's a certain point where he is just doing what's in here. And now maybe sacrifice or putting himself in front of, a shooter to try and take the shooter down. Maybe that's over here. Maybe backing up his guy as he's running down a hall where we know there's an active shooter. Maybe that's over here. So understanding the overlap and offset as it pertains to each individual alliance, it gives us some clarity of understanding. So we know, hey, the cops that we have, this is pretty much what we can expect. But there's going to be times where they gotta run down and clear rooms to find an active shooter, or they got to engage a shooter who's about to walk into a building. So what we have to do is we have to find a way to either hire somebody who is naturally more overlapped with that, right? So we hire better, or we find a way to drive this identity further in that direction, increasing that overlap over time, right? So those are those two things. So understanding overlap and offset gives us a lens to be able to articulate how these variables play up against each other in almost any time there is two identities or an identity and a task, right? Because we could say the way that we do the comparison is if a guy has a job, there's the guy, and then there's the example or the imaginary or abstract version of him that does that job, right? So the person who does that job is a version of him. He, right, we call this the pure and the real. So the pure version of him that goes down and shoots the bad guys and who he is in real life, we hope that they're overlapped enough that he winds up doing that. But if they're not, we have to understand what our limitations are, right? If I go to a complete stranger in a mall, like, hey, I have a 7-year-old daughter. Hey, do me a favor, watch my daughter. I got to run home real quick. I left my wallet there. Like, I am placing a huge assumption of overlap on the person who agrees to watch my 7-year-old daughter. So much so that if this person either walked away from her or, I don't know, sold her in fucking slave trade, there would be an argument against, well, that guy's a piece of shit. He should face consequence. Well, yeah, but shouldn't I, the idiot who expected this person with no qualifications to lead me to that conclusion, expected him to be the person that would protect my 7-year-old daughter? Am I not a fucking idiot? Of course I am. And that's where the offset occurs in the type of people that you're placing in these situations to begin with. So remember, I said the two ways that you get somebody to do the job is, number one, you get somebody that just who he is overlapped with the job. He is a guy who is going to, in his natural, temperament, personality, identity, he's going to do those things. It's a good hire. But if you got to make lemonade out of the fucking lemons you got, then you have to find a way to do that. And the process is driving more overlap. And maybe it's going to be training. Maybe it's going to be installing pressure. There's a reason why a lot of selection processes in military and even in business, they want a guy to have a wife and kids. They want him to own a home. They want some stability. And then they want to take that and attach it to the tribe so that the person sees everything that he's obligated to protect as falling under the umbrella of this tribal identity, right? And that's how you get more of a willingness to overlap or sacrifice potentially for that tribe from the individual, right? So to me, it's just an easily understood dynamic. But we're just not doing what we know we should be doing. So what should we do? Um, let's not talk abstract. Let's talk specifically about these cops, right? Or the dilemma of cops being cowards. We don't know if it's, across the country. We do, but we don't have these videos like we do with these fucking schmucks down in Valdi. So what do we do? Number one, there should be better hiring processes. There was one guy there that had like a Punisher, like fucking wallpaper on his phone, and he was a complete fucking pussy. Like the only thing he's punishing in that fucking town are the taxpayers, right? But he had his Punisher thing on his phone. Boisterous, words mean absolutely fucking nothing. There should be a selection process, a filtering process, really, to make sure that you get guys that are as overlapped with what the job's going to entail as possible. You want to hire former military guys. You want to hire former fucking door kickers. Like, get the guys that are ready to do the job no matter what, but within the framework of an organization, with protocols and ROEs, etc. Like, those are the guys you should be looking for. Not the fucking guy that maybe was a cool football player in the high school locally, but is otherwise just a piece of shit who has never shown any aptitude for anything concerning courage, bravery, or a commitment to a task. So number one, you make better hires. Number two, of course, and Mike Glover did a great job articulating this, like, you train them. You train them so that they have more of an overlap with the job that you require of them. If you ask me right now, hey, Justin, do me a favor. You eat sushi, right? And I'm like, yeah, I like some sushi. And I need you to make sushi. Here's the ingredients. I'll be back in like a half an hour. Just make this all into sushi. Like, I don't know how to fucking make sushi. I eat some fucking sushi. I can have an idea. If somebody's never seen sushi, I know how to make something and say it's sushi and convince that motherfucker it's good sushi. But actual sushi, I don't fucking know. So there's going to be a certain point where it's like, my commitment to this job is like, well, what the fuck he asked me for? Like, I don't know how to do this. And if it's coming out fucked up, at no point do I feel like I have to own it. It's like, well, he shouldn't have fucking asked me to do this. Because my overlap with the person that knows how to make sushi is so insignificant that it's not functional. I know what sushi is. I've eaten sushi, but that's a far cry from the type of overlap that I have to have with sushi to where I know how to make it, prepare it. So you do the training, so you allow them to have more overlap, more confidence, and confidence. It's really, this is something I can do, which means it's really an identity, dynamic that we're talking about here. When somebody has confidence to do something, they're telling themselves, I do that. I can do that because I do that. And that's what training will do. So you have better hires, you have better training to increase that overlap functionally. And the last thing is fucking consequence. Consequence. And I'm not just talking about shaming these people. That's at a minimum. But we're assuming, presuming, that they have honor to be removed from them through a shaming process. And I think we could, pretty easily agree that that is not, something that they have in spades. They don't give a fuck. They knew that there was somebody shooting children at some point. Like, how do they not just go, fuck? Like, if I don't make a move, there are cameras here. Like, how the fuck am I going to get away with saying that I didn't try and save kids from being shot and I'm a cop? Or that one fucking schmuck with the Punisher thing. It's like, fuck, I got a Punisher wallpaper on my phone. I got to do something. How does that not occur to them? So it's not even something that comes organically, from their subconscious, this commitment to the job. But they had enough time to process shit like, oh shit, like, I ain't getting away with this if I don't go in there. Even that was not something to convince them to sort of at least do more of a job than they did, right? Treasure says, throughout history, people have been given the highest honors over their feats of self-sacrifice. And here's the thing. I absolutely agree. And when you guys have heard me talk about suicide in the past, I've always said that a society should treat people who kill themselves to avoid living should be deemed quitters. There should be no honor placed upon them. Honor should be removed. They should be considered to be quitters moving forward, and their legacy should suffer. And a lot of people get butthurt, and a lot of just either weak or feminine individuals can't get over the nurturing inclination that they have and the aversion towards conflict that they have, and they want to say, well, you don't know what they were in, you don't know what they were going through, you don't know. It's like, so what the fuck does that mean? So you can't say that they shouldn't have. It's like, okay, so you're saying they should have killed themselves. Is that what you're saying? Well, no, I don't think. Then shut the fuck up, because we agree. What, I'm just not saying it properly for you? I'm not adding enough sugar to this fucking medicine that I'm trying to feed you? Like, get the fuck out of here. But on the other side of that, the people who sacrifice, of course, as brought up just a few moments ago by FL Treasure, of course, they were lauded, they were honored, they were looked at as these heroes and given this incredible amount of status, their legacy, their name, as it should be, because that is how a society incentivizes that behavior. But what do we do now? I just saw, I don't know if it was on HBO Max or Amazon Prime or something. They made another show about Anthony Bourdain. I never watched his show, so, there's that. But I can't understand how you think watching the show and loving his show has anything to do with condemning his fucking suicide. Well, he didn't commit suicide. He was going to unveil the names. Like, I'm not getting into that. If that's the case, then yeah, we'll have a different discussion. But if it's somebody who was depressed, didn't like life, and killed himself, he needs to be called a fucking quitter. That's it. But what do? They make fucking shows about him. You have people railing on about how great he was and this and that. So if you have somebody on the fence who's looking to off himself and he sees how these people who fucking quit are treated by society, why wouldn't it be something that's a little bit more of a realistic, proposition for them? Why wouldn't they say, maybe I should? Look how my name will be treated. Look how my legacy will be upheld. No, but we don't do that. We don't do that in society. We want people to, feel good. Never mind being good, right? Good is a very, again, functional term based in utility. Something is good when it helps us establish and pursue our mission. Something is bad when it stops us or sabotages our ability to pursue mission. That's good and bad. It's not these universal, like whatever makes me feel warm and fuzzy, or whatever activates these certain neurotransmitters is good, whatever activates these other neurotransmitters is bad. Could we be more fucking selfish as an individual? All right. So absolutely. That's exactly, what we should be doing and the lens that we should be looking at these things through. FL Treasure says one of the basic tenets of Christianity is self-sacrifice. John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. This concept relates to many tribes universally. That's right, because this is how we functionally survive. Not everybody's going to make it. But here's the thing that should give everybody a little bit of hope. Not everybody lives forever either. So there is a point where it is realistic to assume that people should be obligating, volunteering to sacrifice themselves for the existence of their tribe. This is old wisdom. No Name, what's up, No Name? Says, honestly, those cops look like 75 IQ drones. I doubt they even have an internal monologue. And I will say this, whether they had a 75 IQ or not, as soon as that fucking fear gets a grip of them, I'll be surprised if it fucking passes 60. Sometimes, retards drool. That's bad. But sometimes they drool out of their eyes in the form of tears, right? So you become so emotionally distraught that you're dysfunctional. What's the fucking difference? You're sitting there just as fucking useless, right? As a nipple right here. uh, I find it strange how the Japanese, who have an honor culture, seem to have incorporated suicide into it. You know, it's funny. I'm glad you brought that up, because a distinction to be made between suicide and sacrifice is the mission, right? So in my book, I'll draw a parallel. In my book, I talk about autocratic leadership, right? Autocratic leadership, which is basically leadership that says, listen, you don't fucking matter. We got a job to do, or you got a job to do, right? And the two types of autocratic leaders are the tyrant and the general. General in a military connotation. And the tyrant, what he does is he says, listen, I'm the mission. Whatever you are outside of this alliance does not exist to me. You are completely what is overlapped in our alliance. Therefore, you will do what I say, because your job is what I say. You are a vessel or an extension or a tool that my identity uses to pursue my own mission. I'm your mission. That's what a tyrant does. The general says equally, you don't fucking matter. Who you are outside of this alliance does not exist to me. You are going to be held to the standard of doing whatever the fuck I tell you, and any of your opinions outside of what I tell you to do does not matter to me. But here's the distinction, the difference between a tyrant and a general. The general does not consider himself to be the mission. The general can articulate the mission that exists transcendent of his own identity. And usually a general is in an alliance with somebody who has obligated themselves, i.e., volunteered for this relationship to pursue this external mission. They're both autocratic forms of leadership, but one has the mission internally in the leader, one has the mission external to the leader, right? And the general form of leadership is usually most effective in short-term missions. Because the individual who is being led by the general can hold the breath of his offset for a certain amount of time and just ignore that part of him. But eventually he has to bring that into the fold and regain his equilibrium as an individual. And that's why even, a general form of autocratic leadership is not a good thing for the long term, right? So that's the distinction to be made. All right, guys. Oscar, what's up, brother? Yarn Saxa, I'm glad you were able to make it. I'm going to stop it there. I said in the beginning that I would get to those topics that I put in the email, but I also said famous last words, because once I get fucking going, there I go, right? It's been an hour. I'll remind you guys, if you like this, the video, do all the algorithm stuff for me, please. I hate asking. I always feel like I take a little bit of a loss when I kowtow to the algorithms of the overlords of social media. But hey, this is where I'm playing the game, so there are some rules that I have to abide by. MasterChim.com. Sign up for your email. There's just and I truly believe there's going to be a point where guys like me are not allowed to have free voices on the major social media platforms. So that's a way to always stay connected to what I'm doing and the messages that I'm sharing. Aside from that, I appreciate you all. And to all you brothers and sisters out there, I will see you next week, same time. And as always, pressure to power.